My name is Michael, and for 8 years I thought I had the perfect marriage. I worked hard, built a successful construction company from the ground up, and was proud to support my wife Vanessa and, by extension, her struggling family business. I never questioned writing those checks or transferring those loans when they needed help. That's what family does, right? You support each other through tough times. At least that's what I believed until 3 months ago, when I accidentally discovered the truth that shattered my entire world. It started with a forgotten laptop. Vanessa had left for a weekend girls' trip with her sisters, something that had become increasingly common over the past year. I was working from home that Friday, finalizing some contracts for a new development project, when my laptop died unexpectedly. With deadlines looming, I remembered Vanessa had left her laptop on the kitchen counter. She wouldn't mind if I borrowed it just to finish these emails. That's when I saw it. The laptop was in sleep mode, and when I opened it, there it was, her email account, open to a conversation between her and her father, Robert. I'm not the type to snoop, never have been, but a sentence caught my eye that made my blood run cold. Michael doesn't suspect anything yet. Just a few more months and we'll have everything we need. I should have closed it. Should have respected her privacy. But something in me knew this wasn't right. So I scrolled up, reading through months of exchanges between Vanessa and her parents. What I found made me physically sick. For the past 3 years, the money I had been lending to her family's struggling furniture business wasn't being used to pay suppliers or cover operating costs like they claimed. Instead, they had been systematically diverting it into a separate business entity they had created, one that I had no stake in, no knowledge of. Every time I wrote a check to help them stay afloat, they were building their own safety net using my hard-earned money. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst was reading my own wife's words about me. "Don't worry, Dad. Michael's so wrapped up in his construction projects he doesn't even look at the bank statements. As long as we keep playing the struggling family business card, he'll keep pouring money in. Once we have enough to launch the new company properly, I can file for divorce and we'll be set." I sat there staring at the screen, my hands shaking, breath caught in my throat. 8 years of marriage, and I was nothing but a walking ATM to her. A stepping stone. A means to an end. They had it all planned out. Use my success and generosity to build their new business, then Vanessa would divorce me, claiming she'd supported me emotionally while I built my company, entitling her to a substantial portion of my assets. Meanwhile, her family's failing business would conveniently be worthless on paper, so I couldn't claim any of it in the settlement. It was the perfect con, and I'd fallen for it completely. I remember closing the laptop slowly, feeling like I was moving underwater. Everything suddenly made sense, the increasing financial requests, Vanessa's mysterious weekend trips, her family's excessive gratitude that always felt a little performative. They weren't just accepting help, they were executing a long-term strategy. I didn't confront her immediately. I needed time to process, to think, to plan. I'm not an impulsive person. Building a construction business from nothing taught me patience and strategy. So while Vanessa enjoyed her girls' weekend, which I now suspected wasn't with her sisters at all, I did what any rational person would do. I called my lawyer. By Monday morning, I had a complete picture of what had been happening. My lawyer confirmed my worst fears. Over the past 3 years, I'd transferred more than $380,000 to her family's business. Money that, on paper, was documented as loans but with terms so vague they were essentially gifts. Money that had been promptly moved to another company called Meridian Furnishings LLC, a business registered solely in the names of Vanessa's parents and siblings. When Vanessa came home Sunday evening, I greeted her with a smile and asked about her trip. She launched into elaborate stories about spa treatments and wine tastings, complete with details that only someone who had rehearsed a lie would include. I nodded and asked questions, playing along while something died inside me with every fake laugh and touch she offered. "How was work while I was gone?" she asked, curling up against me on the couch, her hand resting on my chest in that familiar way that used to make me feel loved. "Productive," I replied, which wasn't a lie. Securing my financial accounts and meeting with lawyers was extremely productive. "How's your family doing? Has your dad figured out that issue with the suppliers?" Her eyes flickered just slightly, a tiny tell I'd never noticed before. "Still struggling. Actually, Dad was hoping to talk to you this week. They've got a big order but need some capital to fulfill it." There it was, the next withdrawal request, right on schedule. "How much this time?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. "Just 40,000, she said, as if it were pocket change. They'll pay it back as soon as the order is complete. You know they're good for it." I almost laughed. The audacity was astounding. Instead, I simply nodded. "I'll think about it." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay next to the woman I'd loved for 8 years, the woman who had apparently been plotting my financial ruin, and felt nothing but a cold emptiness. In the morning, I made an excuse about an early meeting and left before she woke up. Instead of going to the office, I drove to her parents' furniture showroom. It was time to see exactly what I'd been investing in all these years. Walking into Wellington Fine Furnishings was like stepping into a sad time capsule. The displays were outdated, the inventory sparse, and only one other customer was browsing disinterestedly. This was supposedly the business that constantly needed cash infusions to stay afloat. The business that, despite my hundreds of thousands in loans, never seemed to improve or modernize. Robert, my father-in-law, spotted me from across the showroom, his face lighting up with that practiced smile I now recognized as predatory rather than welcoming. "Michael. What a surprise. Vanessa didn't mention you were stopping by today." "Spontaneous visit," I replied, shaking his hand firmly. "Thought I'd finally take a proper look at what I've been investing in all these years." Something flickered in his eyes, caution, maybe even fear. "Well, as you can see, we're managing. The economy's been tough on small businesses like ours." "So I've heard. Every time you ask for money." His smile faltered. "We appreciate your help, son. You know that. Family sticks together." "Family," I repeated, the word tasting bitter in my mouth. "Tell me, Robert, what's Meridian Furnishings?" The color drained from his face so quickly I thought he might pass out. He grabbed my arm, steering me toward his office in the back. "Let's talk privately." Once the door closed behind us, Robert's friendly father-in-law act disappeared. "Who told you about Meridian? Does it matter? What matters is you've been using my money to fund it while keeping me in the dark." He leaned back against his desk, arms crossed defensively. "It's just a side venture. Insurance, in case this place doesn't turn around. A side venture that my wife and her entire family are part of, except me. Despite my money building it." Robert had the decency to look uncomfortable, at least. "Michael, business is complicated. We needed a backup plan. Wellington's been in the family for generations, but the market's changing." "And divorcing me? Was that part of the backup plan too?" His eyes widened. He clearly hadn't expected me to know everything. "That's between you and Vanessa. Marriage has ups and downs." "Stop," I cut him off. "Just stop. I've seen the emails, Robert. I know exactly what's been happening. The systematic withdrawal of funds, the secret company, Vanessa's plans. All of it." For a moment, he looked genuinely rattled. Then, remarkably, his expression shifted to something resembling indignation. "Now listen here. We've welcomed you into this family for 8 years. Vanessa's been a devoted wife. So what if we use some of that money to diversify? You're hardly hurting financially. And in a marriage, what's yours is hers anyway." I stared at him, almost admiring the mental gymnastics required to position themselves as the victims. "I'm going to say this once, Robert. The money stops now. Every penny I've loaned you will be documented and pursued. And as for Vanessa being a devoted wife," I laughed without humor. "I think we both know that's not true." I turned to leave, but his next words stopped me cold. "You know, Michael, you've always thought you were better than us. With your self-made success story and your big contracts. But without Vanessa supporting you, networking for you, making you look like a family man to those conservative clients of yours, where would you really be? You needed us as much as we needed your money." I looked back at him, this man who had hugged me at my wedding, who had called me son for 8 years. "The difference, Robert, is that I was genuine. Everything I gave because I cared. That's something your family clearly wouldn't understand." The next few weeks were a strategic chess game. I didn't immediately let Vanessa know what I'd discovered. Instead, I began quietly protecting myself. I moved most of my money to new accounts she couldn't access. I documented every loan to her family with my financial team. I secured my business interests with updated contracts and agreements. When her father called her, panicking about our conversation, Vanessa tried to damage control. She became unusually attentive and affectionate, cooking my favorite meals, initiating intimacy in ways she hadn't in months. All while testing the waters to see exactly how much I knew. "Dad seemed upset after you visited the store," she mentioned casually over dinner one night. "Did something happen?" I shrugged. "We just had an honest conversation about business." "What kind of conversation?" Her voice was light, but her knuckles were white around her fork. "About loans and repayment. About Meridian Furnishings." She froze, then carefully set down her silverware. "Michael, I can explain that." "I'm sure you can. You've been explaining things away for years, haven't you?" Her eyes darted around the room before settling back on me. The loving wife act dropped immediately. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. I've seen the emails, Vanessa. Between you and your father. Planning to divorce me once you'd gotten enough. She didn't even deny it. Instead, her expression hardened. What was I supposed to do? My family was drowning. You have all this money, this successful business, while my parents were about to lose everything they'd built. So that justified stealing from me? Planning to divorce me once I'd outlived my usefulness? It wasn't stealing, she snapped. We're married. What's yours is mine. I leaned back in my chair, studying the stranger across from me. That's where you're wrong. A marriage is a partnership, not an ATM arrangement, and partners don't secretly divert funds and plan exit strategies. You don't understand. No, I understand perfectly. I was never your husband. I was an investment strategy. The next day, I received a call from her brother, Mark, who had always been the most reasonable member of her family. Michael, we need to talk, he said, his voice tense. Things are getting out of hand. We met at a coffee shop downtown, away from both our families. Mark looked exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes and his usually well-kept appearance noticeably disheveled. I want you to know I never agreed with how they handled this, he started, stirring his untouched coffee. The way they used your generosity. It wasn't right. But you didn't stop it either, I pointed out. He winced. No. I didn't. And I have to live with that. But you have to understand, Wellington Furnishings really has been struggling. Dad's too proud to admit it, but they were on the verge of bankruptcy when you and Vanessa got married. So I became the solution. At first, the money really did go to saving the family business. But Dad. He got greedy. Saw an opportunity with Meridian to start fresh, without the debt and reputation problems Wellington has. And Vanessa was in on it from the beginning? I finished for him. Mark hesitated. Not exactly. At first, she genuinely thought she was just helping her family. But over time, he sighed heavily. Look, my sister has always felt entitled to more than she has. When your construction business really took off 3 years ago, something changed in her. Dad noticed it too, started exploiting it. And the divorce plans? That was all her. Dad and Mom never explicitly encouraged it, but they didn't discourage it either. They saw the potential benefit. I absorbed this information silently. It didn't change anything, but at least it filled in some of the blanks. Why are you telling me this? I finally asked. Mark met my eyes directly. Because they're panicking. The latest loan they were counting on from you was meant to fulfill an actual order. Without it, they're going to default. Dad's been calling every bank in town, but with their credit history, no one's biting. That's not my problem anymore. I know, he said quietly. And I don't blame you. But there's something else you should know. Vanessa's been talking to your competitors. Suggesting she has information about your bids and contracts that would be valuable. My blood ran cold. She's threatening industrial espionage now? She's desperate. They all are. He slid a flash drive across the table. This has evidence of everything. Their financial movements, the creation of Meridian, emails between all of them. I made copies before they realized what was happening. I stared at the small device. Why would you betray your own family like this? Mark laughed humorlessly. I'm not betraying them. I'm trying to save them from themselves. Maybe if they face real consequences, they'll finally change. He stood up to leave. I'm sorry, Michael. For whatever it's worth, I always thought you were the best thing that happened to our family. Not because of your money, but because you were decent. Something we haven't had much of. The flash drive contained even more than I'd expected, years of systematic deception meticulously documented. With this evidence, I had everything I needed to protect myself legally. But Vanessa and her family weren't going down without a fight. 2 days after my meeting with Mark, I came home to find Vanessa and her parents sitting in our living room, faces grim with determination. We need to talk, Robert announced, as if he had any authority in my home. About what? I asked, remaining standing while they sat on furniture I had paid for, in a house my work had financed. This situation has gotten out of hand, Vanessa's mother, Diane, interjected. She had always been the quieter schemer, preferring to let Robert take the lead while she worked in the background. We're family, and families work through problems. Are we? Family doesn't steal from each other. Family doesn't plot and scheme for years. Nobody stole anything, Robert insisted, his face reddening. Those were investments in a family business. A family business I have no part in. You have to understand our position, Diane continued, her voice taking on that reasonable tone she used when trying to manipulate. Wellington Furnishings is our legacy, our livelihood. When it started failing, we had to find alternatives. And that required hiding everything from me? Creating a secret company? Planning a divorce? Vanessa finally spoke up, tears in her eyes that I now recognized as tactical rather than emotional. I never wanted to divorce you. That was just talk. Frustration. You know how Dad gets when he's stressed about money. I looked at her, this woman I had loved completely, and felt nothing but pity. More lies, Vanessa? Even now? Michael, Robert leaned forward, switching to his authoritative business voice. Let's be practical. You've built a wonderful construction company, but let's be honest, Vanessa's connections through our family helped you secure half those contracts. Her attending those boring business dinners, hosting clients at your home, playing the perfect wife. That has value. So that justifies everything? What we're saying, Diane interjected smoothly, is that we all contributed to each other's success. And we can continue to do so. This doesn't have to be adversarial. I almost laughed at the audacity. What exactly are you proposing? They exchanged glances before Robert cleared his throat. We need that $40,000 to fulfill the Westridge Hotel order. It's legitimate business. Once that payment comes through, we can start repaying what we owe you. And Meridian Furnishings? Another uncomfortable exchange of glances. We were thinking, Robert continued carefully, that perhaps you could become a formal investor. 20% equity. A proper business arrangement. So that was their play. They were still trying to get money from me, just repackaging the con. No remorse, no real acknowledgement of what they'd done, just a new angle to try. Let me make sure I understand, I said slowly. You systematically deceived me for years. Diverted hundreds of thousands of my dollars into a secret company. Planned for Vanessa to divorce me once you'd gotten what you needed. And now that you're caught, your solution is for me to give you more money and accept a minority stake in the company my money built? Diane smiled tightly. When you put it like that, it sounds worse than it is. We're trying to make things right. No, you're trying to salvage your con. There's a difference. Michael, please, Vanessa stood up, approaching me with her hand outstretched. We can fix this. I made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but I do love you. I always have. I looked at her hand, then back to her face. If you loved me, you never would have participated in this. You wouldn't have discussed divorcing me with your father over email. You wouldn't have watched me work 60-hour weeks building my business while you were secretly undermining it. Her hand dropped. So that's it? 8 years of marriage, and you're just done? You were done long before I discovered the truth. The difference is, I'm being honest about it. I turned to her parents. You have until the end of the month to repay the first $100,000. After that, we can discuss a payment plan for the remainder. If you refuse, I'll see you in court with enough evidence to ensure you never do business in this state again. Robert stood up, his face purpling with rage. You ungrateful little, after everything our family has done for you, this is how you repay us? By threatening us? By turning our daughter against us? Your daughter made her choice years ago, Robert. And it wasn't me. Diane placed a restraining hand on her husband's arm. Michael, be reasonable. We don't have that kind of money available. You know the financial situation. I know you've been lying about the financial situation. I know Meridian Furnishings has contracts worth over $250,000 in progress right now. I know you recently purchased a vacation property in Sedona that you never mentioned. Don't tell me what you can and can't afford. Their faces registered shock. They clearly hadn't expected me to have investigated so thoroughly. How did you, Robert began. It doesn't matter. What matters is that the free ride is over. I suggest you start liquidating assets. After they left, Vanessa tried one last time to salvage not our marriage, but her comfortable lifestyle. You know I can't afford to move out right now, she said, tears flowing freely. All my money has gone to helping my family. You mean all my money, I corrected her. And don't worry about moving. I already have. Her head snapped up. What? I've been staying at a hotel for the past week. As of yesterday, this house is on the market. My lawyer will be in touch about the divorce proceedings. Her face transformed immediately, tears evaporating as fury took their place. You can't just sell our home without consulting me. Actually, I can. It's in my name only, one of the few things your family didn't try to get their hands on directly. I picked up the suitcase I'd packed earlier. You have 2 weeks before the new owners take possession. I suggest you use that time to figure out your next steps. I walked out the door, ignoring her threats and curses. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe freely. But freedom came with its own price. The next few weeks were a masterclass in how quickly people can rewrite history when cornered. It started with subtle comments from mutual friends. "Vanessa seems so broken up about everything. I heard you just walked out without warning. Is it true you've been seeing someone else?" Then came the social media campaign. Vanessa began posting vague but pointed comments about standing strong in the face of betrayal and supporting family through everything. Her parents shared tearful messages about struggling small business owners being abandoned by those who promised to help. It was calculated and effective. People who didn't know the details, which was most people, since I hadn't publicly shared the truth, began to view me as the villain. The cold-hearted businessman who abandoned his wife and her struggling family business. One evening, I received a call from Jason, my oldest friend and godfather to his children. "Mike, what the hell is going on? I just got an earful from Diane at the grocery store about how you're destroying their family business and threatening to bankrupt them." I sighed, rubbing my temples. "It's complicated, Jace." Then uncomplicated for me. "Because from what I'm hearing, you've turned into some kind of monster overnight, and that doesn't track with the guy I've known for 20 years. So I told him everything. The systematic deception, the diverted funds, the secret company, the divorce plans. By the end, he was cursing under his breath. "Those manipulative bastards. And now they're playing victim? That's rich." "That's their specialty," I replied wearily. "They've had years of practice. You need to set the record straight, Mike. People are buying their version because it's the only one they're hearing. I'm not interested in a public mudslinging match. The divorce will be finalized in a few months, and then I can move on." "It's not about the divorce," Jason insisted. "It's about your reputation. Your business relies on trust and relationships. If people think you're the kind of guy who abandons family commitments, that could hurt you professionally." He had a point. Construction was a relationship business, especially in a mid-sized city like ours where everyone knew everyone. Perception mattered. The final straw came a week later when I discovered Vanessa had actually started contacting my clients, spinning some story about me mismanaging funds and suggesting they audit any work I'd done for them. It was a desperate, vindictive move that could seriously damage my business. That night, I sat down at my computer and began typing. Not an angry rant, not a detailed exposure of their schemes, but a simple, factual post that I shared on my personal and business social media accounts. In light of recent rumors and speculation, I feel compelled to address some misconceptions about my separation from Vanessa and my business relationship with Wellington Furnishings. For the past 3 years, I have provided over $380,000 in financial support to my wife's family business. Recently, I discovered these funds were being diverted to a separate company that I had no knowledge of or stake in. I also uncovered discussions about using my assets and business connections before filing for divorce. I have documentation of all transactions and communications, which have been provided to my legal team. I am not seeking to damage anyone's reputation or business. I simply cannot continue to financially support people who have systematically deceived me. I respectfully ask for privacy during this difficult time, and I want to assure my clients and business partners that my company continues to operate with the same integrity and commitment to quality that has always been our foundation. Thank you for your understanding. I attached just one piece of evidence, a redacted email between Vanessa and her father discussing how to maximize what we can get from Michael before the divorce. It was enough to make the point without exposing everything. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Friends, colleagues, and even casual acquaintances began reaching out with messages of support. Several admitted they'd been contacted by Vanessa or her parents with various stories about me, which they now recognized as manipulation. Most significantly, 3 of my major clients called to confirm they'd received concerning calls from Vanessa but had been skeptical of her claims. My honesty in addressing the situation directly had reinforced their trust. Vanessa and her family were furious. The carefully crafted narrative they'd been building crumbled overnight. Robert actually showed up at my hotel, red-faced and shouting in the lobby until security escorted him out. Vanessa sent a series of increasingly hostile texts, alternating between threats and tearful pleas. But their most desperate move came from Diane, who somehow got my mother's phone number and called her with an elaborate story about how I had manipulated and controlled Vanessa throughout our marriage, restricting her access to money and monitoring her communications. My mother, who had watched me support Vanessa unconditionally for 8 years, wasn't buying it. "Mrs. Wellington," she said calmly, "I've known my son his entire life. If you think I'll believe he suddenly transformed into an abusive monster, you're sadly mistaken. Perhaps instead of trying to damage his relationships, you should focus on repairing your own integrity." The final chapter of this saga played out in court. Despite their attempts to drag out the divorce proceedings and secure a substantial settlement, the evidence was overwhelming. Vanessa's claims that she had significantly contributed to my business success fell apart under scrutiny. The judge was particularly unimpressed by the documented plan to divorce me after extracting maximum financial benefit. In the end, the divorce was finalized with minimal financial entanglement. I agreed to forgive the loans to her family in exchange for a clean break, no alimony, no further claims against my business or personal assets. It was worth it to be free of them completely. Wellington Furnishings closed its doors 6 months later, unable to secure further credit or attract new customers once word of their business practices spread through our community. Meridian Furnishings struggled on for another year before dissolving under the weight of mismanagement and a tarnished reputation. Mark, Vanessa's brother, eventually reached out to apologize again. He had left the family business shortly after our coffee shop meeting and started his own small woodworking studio in another state. They still don't understand what they did wrong, he told me. In their minds, they were just being strategic, not deceitful. As for me, I rebuilt my life piece by piece. My construction company not only survived but thrived, partly because clients appreciated the integrity with which I'd handled the entire situation. I sold the house that had never really felt like a home and bought a smaller place closer to downtown. I reconnected with old friends who had been pushed to the periphery during my marriage, rediscovered hobbies I'd abandoned, and slowly began to trust again. It's been 2 years since I discovered those emails on Vanessa's laptop. 2 years of painful growth and rebuilding. Sometimes I still wonder how I missed the signs for so long, how I could have been so blind to the manipulation happening right in front of me. But then I remember that the problem wasn't my trust, it was their deception. I heard Vanessa moved to Arizona last year, apparently working for a real estate company. Robert and Diane downsized to a condo and rarely speak about their former business or their failed schemes. The last I heard, they've started telling people they retired by choice after a successful career in furniture. Some days, I still feel the sting of betrayal. Other days, I'm grateful for the wake-up call that freed me from a family that saw me as nothing but a resource to exploit. Either way, I've learned an invaluable lesson about the difference between generosity and being taken advantage of. About the importance of transparency in any relationship. About standing up for yourself when people try to manipulate you. Most importantly, I've learned that sometimes the hardest decision, walking away from people who claim to love you, is the most necessary one for your own well-being. Real family, whether blood or chosen, doesn't scheme behind your back. They don't plot to take what's yours while smiling to your face. They support you, respect you, and value you for more than what you can give them. I don't know what the future holds, but for the first time in years, I'm facing it with clear eyes and an unburdened heart. And that's worth more than any business, any house, or any relationship built on lies could ever be.